everyone. Welcome to the Moore Report. I'm Senator Colton Moore, representing the Northwest here in the Georgia State Senate. And this is episode 2 of our podcast series that I'm bringing to you every single week this session, where we're going to be highlighting what's going on in session, what we're voting for, what we're voting against, and legislation that we plan to promote. One of those pieces of legislation is repealing Certificate of Need. Now, what is Certificate of Need? Well, it's this monopoly system that hospitals in the state of Georgia utilize to guarantee themselves no competition in the marketplace. And I have with me special guest Hannah Cox, who recently moved to Georgia and is a new Georgian, and she's going to share some information with you about why it's important that we bring free market back to healthcare in Georgia.
Well, thanks, Colton. It's good to be here. And I have to say, this is somewhat anecdotal, but I've lived a lot of places, and since moving to Georgia the past years ago, I've never had a hard time getting health care. I am not exaggerating. And I live right next door to Emory.
Wow.
So you would think I'd have all of these doctors at my disposal. You'd think my wait times would be nothing. I have had to fight tooth and nail just to get basic appointments with general practitioners, get basic testing, have to wait, 10, 20 minutes just to get through to make an appointment. It has been bizarre. And for the longest time, I was thinking, maybe this just is because it's such a big city, it's, so concentrated. But per usual, as when I started digging into the problem, I found that no, it's the government that's involved in this that is actually...
So you said you've been to other states. Is there another state that you would say is like the best experience you've had in healthcare?
Well, I actually would say Tennessee, but we repealed some Certificate of Need laws in Tennessee while I was there working with the Beacon Center. And, Tennessee is a healthcare capital, but I think Georgia has a right to that, to kind of name themselves that too. There's a lot of healthcare investments here. But based on the number of people that are here, we are falling drastically behind. And so when I started looking into it, over $700 million in investments in Georgian healthcare has been blocked just over the past decade.
Whoa. How much of the... 700 million?
700 million.
Wow, okay, so we're approaching the billion mark.
That's what's been blocked. There's another 380 million that's tied up in Certificate of Need appeals right now.
Wow.
So,
okay, we are at $1 billion.
We're close to $1 billion.
In cost.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, what do you mean by hospitals repealing, or not repealing, but fighting the certificate? So let me tell you a little bit about what happened in Northwest Georgia. We had 2 hospitals who were battling it out for 2.5 years. None of my constituents had any opportunity at seeing a hospital being built because of this Certificate of Need. Yeah. So those 2 hospitals, I guess, fall into that would you say 380 million?
Yes. Now, you're in more of a rural area, and that typically is what we see. This is something that hurts rural areas the most. And throughout Georgia, we're seeing that this is targeting places like your district, like Augusta, Savannah. And just to kind of explain to people how this works, because when people first hear about this, I was the same way. When somebody first approached me about Certificate of Need, I was like, no, that can't be what it is. But in the 1970s, under this huge protectionist regime, you have Nixon, they think protectionism's great, and they're pushing all these really terrible ideas, and Con is one of them. And they actually mandate that all of the states implement Certificate of Need. And they say, basically, you need to reduce the amount of supply, because this will basically ensure that the hospitals make enough money to survive. Because if there's too much competition, they'll go under, and certain areas might not have enough investments, and they might have access to care. So this is something that's good for the people, right? This protectionism. And so it was put in place with the direct intent to limit supply, which is something that should shock people in a capitalist society. But by 1987, the federal government goes, this is not working, as we said it would, and they got rid of it at the federal level. But the rest of the states have still had it in place. And so now, to this day, 36 states still have it on the books. Now, over 12 or 13 have repealed it in recent years. We're hoping Georgia will be the next, maybe South Carolina.
I hear communist California doesn't even have Certificate of Need.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And the states that have repealed it, the ceiling has not dropped. They're doing great. But basically how it works in Georgia right now is if you want to come in and open a new hospital, and it's not just hospitals, if you want to add new beds for infants from NICU units, if you want to add birthing centers for pregnant women, you have to come before a state-regulated board and argue why you need it. And then your competitors who fund many of the politicians in the state, many of the people on these boards.
Yeah, that 380 million.
Yeah, they get to come in and argue why you don't. And so because of that, you see that Georgia is not getting the healthcare investments that it needs. And the consequences to that have been dire. The U.S. is already, I think, 46th in the world when it comes to maternal mortality rates.
46th in the world when it comes to, oh my gosh.
Not great to be a pregnant woman in the U.S.
Yeah.
Georgia, though, is particularly bad. Our rates were beneath that of Iraq in 2015. Unreal. That's mind-boggling. And then when it comes to infant mortality, we're actually the 15th worst in the country.
I thought we were a pro-life state.
Right. So, and what's interesting to me is I'm not pregnant, haven't been pregnant, but I know a lot of pregnant women, and they increasingly don't want to have the hospital birthing experience because there's a lot of diseases in hospitals, there are a lot of errors in hospitals because of the death rates we just mentioned. So they're looking for more natural alternative methods, and so birthing centers or using midwives, things like this have become much more popular for women. We are directly blocking that. Hospitals are blocking those kinds of centers. They just blocked one in Augusta recently from opening because they want women to be forced to come into their death trap hospitals and have their babies. So
so this certificate is not just for an overarching umbrella of all hospitals. Like there's certificates for just each individual parts of medicine.
Yes, even down to the beds. I mean, there was one certificate of need block that blocked 15 new NICU beds. I think it was in Bartow County. I'm gonna have to look back. I'm still new to Georgia, so don't.
So think about COVID. Right?
Yes.
I mean, all of a sudden we go through this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Everybody's rushing to get medical care, but we've restricted the amount of medical care that's even available to Georgians.
Right, and you cannot just overnight snap your fingers and produce these kinds of facilities, these kinds of investments. And like I said, we've blocked $1 billion, but that actually doesn't even totally summarize the full amount of care that we've probably blocked. Because of those certificate of need laws in place, a lot of people who maybe want there to create government-sanctioned monopolies in healthcare.
Right.
It is there to make the cost of healthcare more expensive, and it's there to benefit the people who are already in it, which means not only do you have higher costs, not only do you have a harder time getting seen, it also means you're blocking innovation in healthcare, like you just mentioned, right? There are all kinds of cool things people are coming up with in medicine that I think would be much better for consumers and patients. Things like these surgery centers, things like direct primary care, things that actually cut the corrupt insurance companies out of the picture altogether and get back to doctor-patient relationships, cost-to-consumer kind of relationships. But all these things are also blocked under certificate of need because you're preventing the expansion of people who want to come and do things differently.
Well, I mean, we hear back at home, you know, there's still a mighty push for economic development. But how in the world do you have economic development in an area if there's no health care? Right? What big industry wants to show up and set up a factory if none of their workers are going to have health care, right? Or wives aren't going to have prenatal care? If that doesn't exist, how do you ever anticipate that you're going to have economic growth? You know, and then about monopolies too. I mean, those Democrats are always saying, you know, we hate the big corporate monopolies. Yeah. You know, capitalism's terrible. Well, you've got a government right here that's protecting this monopoly.
I mean, this has been on both sides one of the most infuriating issues I've worked on because catch lawmakers out in front defending this, probably not that often because this is something as soon as the actual people hear about it, they're mad. Oh, yeah. They want to know what's going on. But behind the scenes, a lot of these guys on both the left and right and women are taking money from the hospital associations, are totally in their pockets, and will sit there and defend these laws and will quietly vote to keep them in place. And it makes me mad because on the right, you say you're pro-life, you say that you care about individual liberty, you say you're capitalist. This is nothing of the sort. And then on the left, you claim you hate corporations, that you're for the little guy, that you want healthcare to be affordable for all, and then you run around screaming about antitrust at the national level, wanting to break up tech companies, and yet you are empowering the largest monopolies in this country that actually are life and death entities, right? If Twitter kicks me off, I don't die over it. If I can't get to a hospital, I have to drive 20 miles and I'm bleeding out in delivery, that's life and death.
No, it is. It's a life and death situation. I think COVID brought to light for so many lawmakers across the state, hey, why don't we have enough beds?
Yeah.
And this is this renewed effort, you know, probably since back in the 80s, to finally repeal certificate of need. So I think there's a real great opportunity this year to get that done. I mean, there's countless organizations who have made that their top and primary focus. Can you share with it? I know you said the Beacon Institute is over there.
Yeah, well, the Beacon Center I worked for in Tennessee was a pro-free market think tank that was working on that there. They were successful in both 2016 and I think in 2021 in repealing a good number of the certificate of need laws in Tennessee. South Carolina, your neighbor, came within an inch of full repeal last year. Their governor came out in support of it. They had the votes. And then something slippery went down, as it tends to do. It got killed literally, I think, 2 days before session ended in this procedural move in its last committee by a former supporter of Certificate of Need repeal, who was the incoming Speaker of the House. And then it came out about a month later that the outgoing Speaker of the House was named the top new lobbyist for the state's largest hospital association.
Oh, of course.
So some monkey business going on around there. And but I think they'll be back this year. I think they're very close. Florida recently, I think 2019, repealed the vast majority of their laws. Mississippi, I know, is mounting a challenge. So this is increasingly something that people are demanding. COVID, I think, revealed to a lot of people, one, that these kind of crony regulations were even on the books, right? A lot of people know that things are broken. They don't always know why.
Right.
And then it also revealed that as states sort of immediately pulled back on not only things like this, but telehealth regulations, occupational licenses, they realized, like, oh, all of this is not about health and safety. This is about the state making money, the state having control of the market, and when there actually is an emergency, all of a sudden we don't need these regulations in place anymore. I think it was very revealing to people. So I think
we saw that across the board, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even in transportation, when it comes to trucking, all these trucking regulations. Oh, actually, we need these trucks to move, right?
Yep.
So
that's exactly right. So I think you're going to continue to see a demand for this. I'm mostly in the media. I have pretty decent sized followings across multiple platforms. This is the one issue when I talk about it that people are almost outright scandalized. They can't believe this is being done to them.
Yeah.
They're like, how do I get involved? I see them start tagging their lawmakers, like, what are you going to do about this?
Right.
So I think it's something where the support is there in the grassroots. It's a common sense thing. It's a principled thing on both sides. Like, this should be an obvious thing that Democrats and Republicans come together on. To be quite frank, the only reason you would vote to keep this in place is because you're in the pockets of these hospital associations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, preach it. You know, the mayor of Knox County, a friend of Liberty,
Yes.
Glenn Jacobs.
Love Glenn.
I saw, I guess it was on Instagram yesterday. He put out a video that said we got to keep going further. So they had some repeal, I guess, but he's encouraging his lawmakers to get after it too. I mean, what would you recommend to my constituents? Because obviously they have a senator who's gung-ho about eliminating certificate of need. But if you're watching the podcast and you live outside of my district, what would you tell those folks? What
I think you need to remember that lawmakers need support. I think there's very few people up in politics that have the kind of spine you have, Colton. And I appreciate you. You actually push for full repeal, carte blanche.
Throw it in the trash.
Get rid of it all across the board. A lot of states kind of pick and choose simply because they feel like they don't have the muscle to fully go up against hospital associations. When you go into the certificate of need battle, you've got millions of dollars, lots of entrenched interests, very powerful people on one side, and then you've got people like me and you who are principled, who mean what we say when we care about people, who mean what we say when we say we want things to be affordable for people. But we've got a lot to go up against, right? And I can't sugarcoat that.
Right.
So the grassroots need to be there. They need to be loud. They need to be vocal. And they need to put pressure on people who have the ability to make these decisions that can outweigh the pressure of the dollar that they're seeing on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it? Alex de Tocqueville said, we get the type of government we deserve, and if we don't get involved in it, we don't deserve very much.
That's exactly
and
right.
We deserve a hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the second episode of the podcast.
Good to be here.
And I hope we can have you back in the future on some other issues.
Absolutely.
And if folks, reach out to Hannah. She's all over social media. You'll see her on Fox Business and on Kennedy on Fox News from time to time. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to help highlight some of these nasty things that Certificate of Need brings to us.
Absolutely, and thanks for your work up here. It's good to know you're up here
All
fighting
right.
for us.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, take one done.
That was a great take, y'all.